Welcome to App Talk with Upptic, where we dig into the nitty-gritty of how to grow apps and games. We speak with industry experts about specific strategies, tools, and tactics used to find success, and we keep you up to date with emerging news and trends in the ever-changing games, marketing, and technology ecosystem. My name is Xander Agosta, Director of Marketing here at Upptic, and joining me today are my co-host,
Warren Woodward, co-founder of Upptic.
And our guest,
Ian Masters, founder, CEO of Flip Games.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us, Ian. Excited to have you on pod.
Very happy to be here. It's been a while.
Yeah, we've had this
Yes.
in the pipeline for quite some time.
I think you might have the record, Ian, for the person we've wanted to have on the show for the longest versus actually getting you on. So glad we got to make it work out.
Yeah, me too. Me too. If you past me is always very optimistic about things that me is able to achieve, but I'm happy to be here.
Awesome.
Great.
Yeah, I think Ian and his team have some really cool and unique perspectives that they bring to the way they're bringing games to market and thinking about underserved communities and gaming. And I'm really excited to dig into those topics in our main segment today.
Awesome. Our first section is Industry Insights, where we do a deep dive on industry news. This is around earnings season. Every quarter turns into like the earning games and marketing earning wrap up. And so we're going to do our best to cover some of the big names in games, like we promised last week. Read more earnings reports in the last year doing the show than I ever have in my entire life. I'll try and do some quotes here and do this justice to a fairly complicated topic, which we'll try and cover quickly. The first one is the Activision Blizzard's earning report. Second quarter 2022 financial results is the name of the article. A couple of quotes. For the quarter ending in June 30th, 2022, Activision Blizzard's net revenue were 1.65 billion as compared to 2.3 billion the second quarter 2021. Operating margin was 21%. GAAP earnings per diluted share were 0.36 as compared to 1.12 for the second quarter of 2021. So it's a big top line miss. Earning per share and margins. Top line miss, earning per share miss, and margins are shrinking. The Q2 cash flow was down 49% to 197 million. Monthly active users is down across the board, with Activision monthly active users under 100 million for the first time in several years. The only positive growth in MAU was Blizzard due to Diablo Immortal bringing in net new players. And while Activision and Blizzard are contracting, King, the shining jewel, continues to grow its revenue, increasing its quarterly revenue by almost 50 million to 684 million for the quarter. That gift that keeps on giving, man, that what an acquisition. So we'll dig into this a little bit more, but what do you guys think about Activision and how the mighty have fallen?
I mean, for me, the biggest surprise here is the positive outlier with King. I mean, obviously, King has built an incredible business, but we've seen essentially just such a consistent negative trend in all gaming earnings for the last couple of quarters, and we're going to get into that with a larger piece on the recession and impact of gaming that we're going to cover today. But yeah, no big surprise about Diablo Immortal being a positive outlier. Obviously, huge organic traction from that, but King is definitely a surprise.
I did see that they said Diablo Immortal received high play ratings, and currently it's standing at 3.5 on Google Play. So I'm not quite sure why they think that. Clearly, a lot of people do love it though. Yeah, it was great. It was great to see King up. That's really good news, I think. It'll be. I mean, I guess we'll never know how this will impact the big acquisition coming up. Who knows? Any ideas?
I imagine it's going to close, and I don't think that the earnings are going to have much of an impact on that. Microsoft, I think, is fairly bullish on this company overall, and I think it folds into their strategic long-term vision. One thing that I forgot to do a pull quote from, but there was a reference to the King ad network growing by 20%. I think it was year over year or quarter over quarter. And that is something that I did not even know existed. I think I might have heard about it a while, but apparently King has an internal proprietary ad network that is growing rapidly, or modestly. And that's another thing. I mean, Warren, should we be buying on the King ad network? What are we doing here? Sounds like we should be.
Well, I'm trying to go backwards in all of the M&A of the last couple of years. Did King buy someone? I remember
think they built it. I think it's homebrew.
Yeah. I feel like wildly undereducated about this.
Yeah, the ad network stuff's really interesting because once upon a time they didn't even have ads in their games at all, right? It was one of the things they were known for. So and probably with ad networks and mediation, it's a constant battle for developers to control the quality of ads in their games. So that's a really smart thing for them to be doing, I think.
Yeah, it's just net revenue. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense for them. Okay, let's just move on to the next piece, which was a fairly surprising outlier. So this is the Electronic Arts fiscal year, or Q2 2022. It's their fiscal year is different, but we won't get into it. For the quarter ending in June 30th, EA's net revenues were 1.76 billion as opposed to 1.55 billion in the same quarter 2021. Earning per share was $1.11 versus 71 cents a year ago. So that was a surprise beat to the upside, which is very much stands out in the current market conditions. EA Player Network, the EA Player Network grew to 600 million active accounts this quarter. Not really sure what that is, but I think it's just basically compilation of everyone with an active EA account that's signed on any device over the quarter. That was my understanding. And ironically, most of the beat was delivered by the outperformance of the FIFA property, both on mobile and on console. And ironically and unfortunately, EA is losing the FIFA franchise title due to the dispute with the actual FIFA organization. And they're going to have to, they're rebranding it. I can't remember, they have some new name they're rebranding it. It's like Ultimate Soccer, Ultimate Football or something like that. And I'm very curious to see the impact that has on the business. I think the one thing to call out is EA had a better quarter than Activision Blizzard, which I went back a couple of years and that is not typical at all. So thoughts here?
Yeah, it's really surprising to see it just powered by a yearly franchise as well too. Super surprising results here. It feels like before this week, every news story we had about earnings and trends in the gaming market was like all bad news, and then for whatever reason, everything seems to have switched to bullish news and charts going up this week.
Yeah. So my big question about this one is a big part of the lift. The good news was in their live services, right? And what we don't know and have no visibility on is what impact Game Pass Ultimate has made to that, because obviously they're part of that and they will be getting revenue and presumably growing users from that service. But yeah, no information on what portion of the live services has been driven by Game Pass, which I thought was pretty interesting.
That's a really good point, Ian.
And then the other thing was, I think in the earnings from November last year, Andrew Wilson was, I think the quote was, NFTs and blockchain games are the future of our industry. And it's gone from that to zero mention of blockchain NFT at all. Not really surprising, but yeah, well, what do you think about that, Warren?
Yeah, it's almost like you can correlate it exactly to the charting of of crypto assets, like the discussion of it in in mainstream gaming press and
just in the crypto crash in general. I think it's like directly correlated. It's like fair weather friends. It's like very clearly everyone is trying to get on the bandwagon, and now it's like it's not the hot thing. So it's just trying to pretend we never mentioned it before.
Yeah. I mean, not to soapbox too much, like because for me, like that segment is always been more about what it lets you do with game design versus like the speculative value of the underlying assets. For me personally, nothing has changed about bullishness in that sector, because that has only gotten more robust as more games are built and experiment. But definitely, like as the heat has come off of the sector from a valuation standpoint, we see all of them mixed with mainstream player hatred in a lot of gaming segments, like definitely a lot of the established developers pulling back from their Web3 initiatives.
Yeah, so congrats to EA. Let's see how the loss of FIFA hurts them down the line. It can't be good. Like that's the main thing. I mean, like, long term, I guess it is, because they're not gonna have to pay for the FIFA franchise to FIFA, which is like $1 billion contract. But anyway, this next one is PlayStation's earnings. I've never really like looked at PlayStation's earnings before, and it's like in yen, so I had to convert it to USD. It was like kind of a headache. But my understanding is the Q2 2022 they earned about 17 billion versus a little under 16.8 billion in 2021. But it's in yen. It's denominated in yen. So like if you actually normalize it for the US or convert it to USD, they're actually making more money in USD denominated terms last year than they are this year, about 20 billion last year versus about 17 billion this year. And that's just due to the macroeconomic conditions of the dollar strengthening against the rest of the world, which I thought was an interesting trend that I don't think a lot about. They also cut sales guidance by 16% on lower than expected sales projections for PS5. They also said PlayStation usage was down about 15% this quarter. One other thing that I'll bundle these all together, but one other thing is like the Microsoft, I didn't do a deep dive on Microsoft earnings, but they also saw like basically modest revenue growth of about like 200 million or so, which is not a lot if you think about Microsoft as a business, but they saw a decrease in operating income. So basically what I'm saying is basically on the console side, we're seeing somewhat of a deceleration in overall usage and revenue growth. And I think that's sort of what we expected based on all the macroeconomic factors that we've been talking about for a couple of weeks. But what do you guys think here about these behemoths?
Yeah, do you guys think that some of the negative, I mean, do you guys believe that console had more of a negative impact than mobile by just sort of cultural trends of the last 6 months, as far as like the world opening back up a little bit, people traveling and more competition for like how people are spending their free time that may impact console and PC more than mobile?
I think that's happened with both, with PC, console, and mobile, where people being locked down and games grew and by an unrealistic amount during that period. And although it looks like things are down now, they're probably still up on where they would have been if we hadn't had that kind of artificial bump in usage. So I think it looks bad, but I wonder if you actually zoomed out and kind of analyzed the growth, if it's if actually games picked up more players during that period because of that.
Yeah, and I think we're going to get into that a lot in this upcoming news segment as well. Xander, any final thoughts on that earnings roundup?
I think that's all right. I think just to the point that Ian just made, Shopify was another beneficiary of the stay-at-home macro trend, and they did a really interesting graph during one of their earnings calls. And basically what it showed was the adoption of Shopify merchants over time. And it's like this really, really clean straight curve that's just like increasing slowly over time. And then you see the COVID spike, and it basically just doubles in its growth rate and just spikes up. And then you see over 2-year periods, it just basically directly reverts to the mean. And so basically just like if you just plot the trend over time of where it was going, you see a spike and then it like just decelerates exactly in line to where that trend would have been. So basically what we saw is like a pull forward, but then over time, at least in Shopify's case, it just completely reverted to as if nothing had happened at all over time. And they all their projections and models were screwed. So I imagine console and PC gaming may have followed a similar trend. Anyway, in the more about this on the next article, which Warren will do a deep dive into.
Yeah, so kind of a companion piece to this earnings breakdown that we've been doing the last few weeks. Dean Takahashi over at VentureBeat, who always has good insights, had a nice deep dive piece titled "How Should the Game Industry Deal with the Recession?" And there's a bunch of interviews with heads of different gaming studios, as well as some good comparison to the Great Recession in 2008. So just a couple of quick pull quotes. So in 2008, the game industry saw a year of growth even as the Great Recession happened amid the bursting of the housing bubble and accompanying financial meltdown. And during the recovery from that recession, the industry began a transformation as Facebook and mobile games exploded. We have a quote specifically on the mobile industry I wanted to call out. This was from Chris Heatherly, the head of games at NBC Universal. He said, "If you're in mobile, I think we're going to see a lot of layoffs. The privacy push by Apple has changed the economic model of the business, and with all consolidation, the push is going to wring the cost out. I don't see the IPO market being healthy for 12 to 24 months, so that puts pressure on all the guys who did not IPO during the boom. If you're a startup and raised pre-bust and have runway, preserve it. It's going to be a while before you can raise again on good terms." So the next area that the article kind of digs into is just this often discussed idea of whether games are relatively recession-proof. So one more quote on that from Mike Wilson, who's the CEO at Deepwell. He said, "We traditionally sell a lot of games in a recession. Home entertainment always does well when people slow down and stop doing more expensive things. In the article, another thing I thought was interesting that I think makes sense. There's a prediction by Dean that we're going to see a lot of two of the strongest years in gaming in 2023 and 2024, largely informed by the delays in game production and lack of flagship releases from COVID. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Another topic that's dug into here was the idea of like blockchain gaming to the rescue. An interesting stat that I hadn't seen before. I knew kind of directionally this was happening, but apparently the first half of this year, Web3 games represented 2.3 billion of the 7 billion raised by private game companies in the first half of the year, which
It's
is
a wild
kind
number.
of crazy. Yeah, when you think about, current market share, like, what is that, about 30% of everything raised for this very nascent segment. So very interesting. We see, I think it's, evidence of why we saw so many like quickly spun up efforts from both new startups and legacy companies moving into the sector, to Ian's point earlier. The article does predict, and I really agree with this, that we're going to see now with the market downturn in crypto, a real cleanse of a lot of the more cynical companies in the space that were quickly spun up and building low quality projects just based on, hey, we need to build something in blockchain ASAP while the market's hot. We expect a lot of this to be cleansed out. As the article again predicts this, but I really agree with this. Like when we hit the recession, I think there's gonna be a lot more focus on, gaming companies, Web3 or otherwise, that have compelling products that actually have either current or clear path to actually producing revenue and profits. So definitely, we've been saying this for a while, but as much as we're bulls for Web3 gaming as a technology, I think it's inevitable that we're having a normalization of kind of the heat in the sector. And then one last thing to call out from the article is that I hadn't really thought about this, but they had some good numbers around this. Like games industry, we know has had a lot of meaningful layoffs. We've been covering them, but apparently it's been a lot lower rate than the tech sector in general. So another kind of indicator that maybe games will be, again, a little more recession proof. So it's a really long, in-depth article, covers a lot. I recommend a read through the whole thing. My high-level takeaways from this article overall, though, was I think the fear in the market is going to have more impact than actual player interest in gaming. We're going to see both big companies and small ones like operating from more defensive positions. Cash is going to be tighter because of its lack of ability to fundraise, and I think we'll see less experimentation. But it seems like history really does not point that there's going to be actual less interest from gamers in actually engaging and wanting these products. So that's kind of my take and all the kind of early signals we're seeing of how this recession is going to affect gaming. Ian, as someone running a game studio, I'm just curious. Like obviously, you've probably been thinking about and having to potentially take actions relative to the current economic climate, but kind of what's your take on how this recession is going to be affecting both small and established game developers?
Games in general are incredible value, and that's why they've been pretty recession proof previously. I don't know if it's going to go exactly the same this time. I think the last big recession was obviously 2008, which predated kind of app stores and free to play in the West. So I don't know, free to play was obviously, very established in places like Korea then. It would be interesting to know like what impact they had then and there. So I think it's really hard to know. I mean, with ATT, it's been harder and harder for companies to target high value players anyway. And that would be the end of the spectrum that you'd expect to be, I don't know, more impacted, but then maybe I'm thinking about it wrong, and maybe actually that's the end that will be least impacted.
Rich people tend to do well in a recession relative to the average person, so maybe they still spend on IAPs and games.
Yeah.
The one note I think that was kind of interesting is like, or that I just agree with, is like the impact on mobile. I mean, we've been covering the impact on mobile and sort of the shrinkage of that segment for the last couple of weeks. And I think what the article calls out around the IPO, missing the IPO market, is going to be really clear. And if you just look across basically every tech company that was a high growth story, they're all cutting costs, they're all laying off employees. And so I think it's what you should expect to see from immature businesses. And I guess we'll see whether or not It's recession proof. I don't really. So are you saying we're in a recession war? And I heard that that's like a hot topic, right? We're supposed to be arguing about this, whether or not we're actually in a recession.
As a founder, the idea of building a sustainable company in a recession in a winter is not unappealing to me. I quite like that idea, and I have because we completed a funding round recently, and I have incredible amount of belief in what we're doing and we're building for the future. I don't have any concerns for us. It potentially, and I think this was mentioned in the article, it may make hiring a little bit easier, as there are more people on the market. So that can be a plus on one side.
Yeah, that's definitely something we've seen for hiring at Upptic. It's a sad thing to see that there's so many more people looking for work right now. But niche roles related to engineering or user acquisition that are typically really hard to find strong candidates, there's a lot more that we're seeing on the market right now. So it's a good time if you're in a position to build and hire. Cool. Shall we move on to the next piece? All right. Sounds good, Warren. Okay, so the next piece here is actually another VentureBeat piece. This is about TikTok potentially launching their own music streaming platform. So the headline is TikTok is coming for Spotify with a potential music streaming app. For a couple of quick poll quotes from the VentureBeat article, TikTok is taking its fight to Spotify and other music streaming platforms as it looks to expand beyond the short video segment, according to a trademark application filed by its parent company ByteDance. The Chinese internet giant has filed a trademark application for a music streaming app known as TikTok Music. The application was filed with the US Patent and Trademark Office in May. The same application was filed in Australia last November. According to the filing, the service will be applicable to mobile phones and tablets, allowing users to purchase, play, share, download music, songs, albums, lyrics, quotes, create, recommend, share playlists, and then comment on music, songs, and albums. So this is pretty interesting. This is a pretty massive move if they follow through with this. It seems like an immense threat to Spotify and Apple Music, particularly for younger generations. And I think besides just the brand value to the younger audience, I think just having meaningful social layers in a music streaming platform is a dream that has not been realized yet, that they're likely optimally positioned for. What do you guys think about this potential move from TikTok into music streaming?
I hate this so much. I like words kind of describe my distaste for this. I think I have a sort of unpopular position, which is I really think TikTok is a fundamental threat to democracy. I think that having an app that's so addictive and so proliferated and so able to push public opinion in control of a autocracy, which doesn't really give a crap about people's individual rights, and he's going to use it to shape a global narrative is really scary. And I think we should be doing more to be proactively pushing back against TikTok and finding ways to regulate it as is, and expanding it into one of my favorite segments of entertainment is music. Scares the crap out of me. I will very likely never be using the service unless something really, really drastically terrible happens. And I think that Western governments, including and global democracies, need to seriously consider what the downstream implications of having tech companies that are controlled by an authoritarian regime autocracy means. And it really scares me a lot, honestly.
I think that's definitely an important aspect for us to be considering as as TikTok expands into more sectors. I mean, to be completely honest, at this point, I'm thinking more from a product and user experience perspective. Like what you said, Xander, everything you said might be true. I feel like I'm not deep enough into to have like highly informed opinion on that aspect of things. But what I do know is TikTok makes like amazing products from what they've launched so far.
It's why it's so scary.
I guess that's part of what you're speaking to. Like, if they can like cleanly dominate this segment, we've already seen how much they're taking over traditional social media.
Ian, do you have more level-headed thoughts?
Well, I mean, I was just thinking I use YouTube Music personally, and I haven't used Spotify much for a long time. But it's incredible how little they've evolved in terms of their features and social aspects and what you can do. So it seems like it's wide open for someone like TikTok to come in and shake that up and make it creative, and people doing mashups and, you know, make it more viral. I mean, I wonder if you know, it's pretty well known that artists make, you know, very little money from existing streaming services.
Yeah.
Be interesting to know if that would be any better for TikTok. I suspect not.
Yeah, as a quote unquote professional musician who receives royalty checks from streaming, even for the relatively low amount of streams, like the music that I've made produces, it's laughable. Like, you know, I've been a musician from both the pre-streaming and streaming eras, and even though the music is consumed and listened to a lot more, like the actual revenue generated from publishing music is so much lower now for, I think, all but the largest artists.
Yeah.
So presumably that's why you're touring a lot now and selling merch.
Exactly. That's why I only work 1 day a week at Upptic and spend the rest of the time hawking t-shirts on the road right now.
I agree with you guys that what we're saying from like a consumer value perspective. I think ByteDance has a track record of creating some of the most incredible consumer products that we've ever seen, and I think the innovation and disruption and the forced innovation across their competitors is sort of like a net positive for the average consumer. But I think we don't really have a good metric for understanding the impact on our society of these technology and just this. We know that, like, in general, there's like some downsides to technology, and even the companies that are local to us, we have some regulation levers, and just having those technologies that are super impactful on society and then having no ability to regulate them, that's just a really scary thought. So anyway, soapbox, I'll get down from my soapbox now.
All right, so I think we have one more story to cover today. Xander, if you want to quickly touch on our last story.
All right, so this last one is one we've covered a couple times, and we'll just briefly touch on this now. It's an AdExchanger article entitled "Google Delays the End of Third-Party Cookies Again from 2023 to the End of 2024." A quote, "Google is postponing its deadline for the phase out of third-party cookies in Chrome by a year until the second half of 2024. Google's original plan was to deprecate third-party cookies in its browser by Q2 2022. That is now. In June of last year, though, Google extended its deadline until end of 2023 and is now tacking on another year. Here's a quote from someone high up at Google: "The most consistent feedback we've received is the need for more time to evaluate the test the new privacy sandbox technology before we deprecate third-party cookies in Chrome." My thoughts are this will probably eventually get rolled out. It kind of needs to happen, but they don't want to pull an Apple where they just smash their entire ecosystem. Advertisers are the main customer of Google. It is their bread and butter. If they anger them, they really don't have any recourse. There's also another component of this, which is there's a real risk that if they do this poorly, they can be regulated for being anti-competitive. And so I think that's another component, is they really want to slow roll us and get this right. What do you guys think about this? Any other thoughts here?
Yeah, my personal thought, I mean, having gone through this with, a version of this with Apple, of reducing ability to track and measure certain things, we know that a lot can change from the time that something is announced. Just timelines and just what you're actually given to work with versus what is initially discussed. So I'm going to really deprioritize putting Upptic engineering resources into like finding clever solutions for this until there's a clear date and there's more clarity and finality on what we will and won't have access to. Otherwise, I think teams have a lot of risk of devoting resources to a potential outcome out of many possible outcomes. And we know that a lot can change. This may end up just being a total non-starter, like you said, Xander, based on if it's ruled anti-competitive.
Cool. Well, we've done quite a bit of news. Let's move on to our main segment, where we will talk to Ian Masters about everything he's working on. So just to get started, Ian, thanks for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, and we can just sort of do a deep dive from there?
Yeah, sure. I have now been making games for 23 years, which is a little bit frightening. Started off making PlayStation 1 racing games at Codemasters, then FIFA World Cup 2002, and then just after that, the games industry in the UK was going through a really hard time, and I found myself unemployed. A bunch of friends and I got together. I had a design for a mobile game I wanted to make. It was a puzzle game called Super Yum Yum. We convinced everyone to make this because Motorola at the time were having a competition where we could win a couple of $1,000 and get it on their new, 128 by 128 color screen phones. Motorola ignored it, but it was nominated for a BAFTA for Best Mobile Game against Hello Kitty, Ministry of Sound, Weakest Link, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, and FIFA. So I accidentally started a company. Did not intend to be a games founder at that point. That company lasted about 7 years. We did some work for Sega, including a couple of Sonic the Hedgehog games, Loco Roco for PlayStation on mobile, Pop Idol X Factor for Namco. So kind of trusted with some like top IP, which was great. But it was mobile was very different back then for Java, for J2ME. We did see the start of kind of the App Store, but only a year or so in. I think Apple had just kind of announced that it was going to be possible to have free games and charge in them, which was just mind blowing. So after that, took a bit of a break. Started teaching at uni part-time. College for Americans, and kids part-time as well, which has actually been a highlight of the last few years. I actually teaching kids game development, coding, but then started a couple of other companies doing a bit of consultancy, and that's a very long way of saying that the last thing I thought I'd be doing at this point in my career would be obsessed with making the best Solitaire game ever. But that's what I'm doing. I think I was worried that I sound like I've gone a bit crazy when I tell people about it, but you'd be surprised like how many people just love Solitaire and think it's a great idea. So yeah.
Great context. I think we should just dig right in there. So we just talked to us a little bit about Flick Games and what is Flick Solitaire and what makes it unique.
Yeah, so we're a one game company. We see when you look at kind of downloads in the card category, it's completely dominated by Solitaire. So we're only making a Solitaire game. It has multiple variations of Solitaire in it, but it's really designed for a new generation of Solitaire players. So one of the things with the classic kind of Solitaire games with green backgrounds and quite basic animations is that they're intentionally all targeting the existing audience of Solitaire, which is a massive audience. And because Solitaire has such good retention, it's really good. It's really good business. And there's some terrific companies out there doing really well in that space. But we think there's an opportunity to make something really fresh and fluid and tactile. So in our game, you can, instead of tapping the cards or dragging them, you can flick them and they kind of fly and glide and flip and land where you want, which makes just that call loop really really satisfying to play. And then on top of that, we work with diverse independent artists who we commission to make a deck of cards for us. So to date, I think we've commissioned 35 artists. They only do one deck each, and we have we have an incredible variety. Please check out our Instagram if you want to see it. There's just thousands and thousands of beautiful pieces of card art on there. For anyone who's watching this on YouTube, you can see behind me the very latest deck, which is I can't quite believe I convinced an artist to hand embroider a deck of cards, but it's very Beatrix Potter, like lots of kind of really cute animals in the English country, hand embroidered. It's really special.
It's unreal. I just want to say, like, yeah, that's one of the things that really I enjoyed about Flick. Flick Solitaire, like, it was one of the early app of the weeks that we featured on this podcast, and yeah, the art featured in the game, the card decks, is just really unreal and a quality that's like not even comparable in any other game in the genre.
Yeah, thank you very much. So we try to be as artist friendly as possible, which is how we've got so much great content in the game. And then we do things, we care a lot about diversity as well. So for example, in Black History Month, the year we launched, we commissioned an additional 4 Black artists and released a new deck every week for Black History Month. We've commissioned a deck for Diwali. We've commissioned a deck for a drag deck featuring drag kings as kings and drag queens as queens. The artist on that is actually now working at King, ironically. And then we recently did a Pride deck featuring LGBT pirates and mermaids.
Fantastic.
It feels good to be doing a startup that we really care about, but doing trying to do some good alongside it in terms of featuring all these great artists. We do interviews with them, we promote them on our website in game, we credit them fully. We want the artists to do well. I've referred artists to other businesses to get them, other games businesses to get them more work. So yeah, really trying to build a community through that. And every artist that does a deck of cards for us gives us brings a new audience, and their audience sees all of the other artists' work in the game. So it's kind of artists supporting artists is the idea.
Yeah, one thing that I really tried to stress to people when I talk about Flick Solitaire is, please don't immediately write it off because it's a quote unquote another solitaire game in mobile. It really is a unique piece. Like besides the art, I think it has the best feeling gameplay by miles. And I'm not like a solitaire fan of any note in particular, but it's something that I really recommend people experience just at least a bit, so you understand, if nothing else, what you can do to innovate within a very, what genre is really older in gaming than solitaire? There's not many. So yeah, huge cheers for the innovation that you've brought to the genre. I want to unpack with you, Ian, this idea of underserved communities in gaming in a few different aspects, both from I think from a business aspect, but also from a player aspect. But I think maybe for some context there, you're also the co-founder of a group called Out Making Games. And if you could share with the audience a little bit more about that organization and the mission of it.
Yeah, sure. So here in the UK, we've had groups such as Baming Games and Women in Games, and there hasn't been an organization for LGBTQ+ people working in the games industry in the UK. So in about 3 years ago, myself and 9 other people got together to start Out Making Games, or OMG for short. And yeah, really it's about community advocacy and education are the pillars of the organization. So we get some sponsorship from companies in the industry who are interested in supporting it. We run events for our members at Develop conference in Brighton. We recently had we have an annual event called Spill the Tea, which is an alcohol-free event close to the venue where people can meet up and chat over cake and coffee and tea, which is kind of a nice alternative thing to do at an event which is usually quite boozy. So that's nice, but also we this year we've been arranging groups to go on various marches, such as Trans Pride in Brighton a few weeks ago and Black Pride in London coming up. But also we do some advocacy work. So for example, last year we wrote an open letter to Rockstar about their representation of trans characters in Grand Theft Auto 3, because they were working on a re-release of the game, and kind of quite unpleasant trans characters that are really designed for the players to hate them, and they thankfully removed that for the new release of the game, which is very good of them.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, things like that. And yeah, it's as I say, it's kind of 10 people on the committee, which is intentionally kind of very kind of broad range of experiences. We have lawyers, we have artists and coders and founders, and yeah, try and make it as representative of the community as possible.
And you have a program called Limit Break. Is that within the bounds of everything you described already, or is that something that's additional to what you've described already?
Yeah, so Limit Break isn't ours at all, but as someone who has had some amazing mentors over the years and feel like I've really benefited from that, and other people can as well, it was important to me and some of the other people on the team that we have a great mentorship program. So actually what we did was we went out and spoke to Anissa Sanusi, who runs Limit Break, which is a mentoring program for women and gender minorities in the UK. And instead of starting one from scratch, we partnered with them. So I think the year before we joined them, I think Anissa almost killed herself supporting 350 people in the mentoring program. So we kind of helped them find an accountant and register as a not-for-profit, and we've kind of been supporting them. And I think this year 1,100 people signed up to the program, both mentors and mentees, and we helped open it up to people of color and LGBTQ+ people as well. And actually, what's really great about it is that it's about leveling up diversity at all levels of the games industry. So there's there's a lot of people in kind of junior levels who are just kind of finding their footing and trying to help them skill up and get be able to climb the ladder. But equally, there's we have CEOs of big companies, games companies in the UK who are mentoring people on the program and really helping them kind of scale the ladder.
One thing related to that, Ian, that I'd love to unpack, you just spoke to a lot of very important work that you've done and the groups that you're part of within the industry side of gaming. I'm wondering if you can speak a bit to the relationship between games industry and underserved communities having more meaningful roles in the industry, and who we're making games for. And if you believe that there's a meaningful correlation to that, and more from a player-based standpoint, your view on that of who are the underserved communities in the player base right now, and how can we better be creating products for them?
Yeah, games has gotten to be such a big, such a massive industry that it's one of the best ways we can continue to grow is by creating content for underserved communities, as you say. And there's so there's games like Dream Daddy, which is a daddy dating simulator that you may know on Steam and PC that did terrifically well. And yes, that is serving a community, but it's also just a new experience that people enjoy playing. Right. I think when you've been playing games for 20 years like me, I don't really want to play another FPS. I want new experiences, right. things I haven't experienced before. And in the same way that cis straight men might enjoy playing as a woman in a video game, actually a lot of people enjoy playing as characters who are very different to them as well. So I think creating content for LGBTQ+ communities and other communities makes a lot of sense, both in terms of reaching a new audience, expanding the audience, but also just interesting, unique, fresh content for the wider audience as well. I mean, we've seen that in film, right? You know, Black Panther's a good example of how would a superhero movie with a black, you know, main character, would that really sell? Well, I think
Clearly.
that answer is clearly yes.
Yeah, and Ian, you've been, you know, working in games for long enough, I think, to see these evolutions. But you know, I'm no spring chicken myself, and coming up in gaming, there was definitely like, it was just a given that the demographic for games, of who played games and who games should be made for, was, you know, like 18 to 35-year-old males. Like that was just a given, and games were often designed from that standpoint, often from people from that demographic. You know, people in games tend to design games that they want to play for themselves. And one, I think the explosion of the mobile industry, and just having gaming devices in the hands of a broader audience really proved that history had that wrong. I mean, just there was, I think the most obvious thing was like, women don't play games. Like that was just a given at a certain point in the games industry. And that's clearly been proven wrong. I still think, you know, that's still, is, you know, for 50% of the population, still a massively sort of underserved segment as far as like diversity of gaming experience. Like it's still kind of in a, there's like 3 genres that are often created for, you know, more female leaning demographics. But yeah, I think it's very important as we open up gaming to more audiences that, you know, it also lets us like make new products. And one thing that I like about your work, Ian, is you're not approaching diversity and inclusivity from sort of a not only from like an ethical and moral standpoint, but just from a fun standpoint. Like the art in your game it's wild, it's super fun. Like you don't need to be like of these demographics to enjoy it. And I think I wonder if you could just speak to like the extra, you know, what is unlocked by tapping more diverse voices in creators and game designers, outside of, you know, doing the right thing morally and ethically. Like how does it actually add value to the products themselves?
Yeah, it's unfortunately, and I will get back to that. There's some negative things that happen as well. And so whilst you know, proud that we have, you know, LGBTQ plus content in the game, in a game that's available in over 50 countries that criminalize LGBTQ plus people, you know, we do get some hate as well. We've had racist and transphobic, homophobic reviews on the on app stores, which are not always easy to get taken down, surprisingly. And also during Pride Month, the average review score of the game went down, even though we didn't really have any specific reviews. So which is a little bit sad, but I'm obviously not gonna change the approach. You know, we get a huge amount of love from players of the game. You know, when you do look at the reviews on the store, they're not normal. Like people saying, you know, I never review a game, but this I'm totally obsessed with Solitaire, or I never liked Solitaire until this game, or, you know, I love that, you know, even little things like the hand in the game. We don't know what skin color is for the person playing, so sometimes it's white, sometimes it's black, sometimes it's brown. It's just randomized. And some people really love just little things like that in the game. You know, it's, you know, surprisingly, with the Pride deck, the most positive feedback we had on that was from bisexual players saying, you know, thank you for including us, because we don't, you know, often get included in that way. So it means a lot. It means a lot to players. And yeah, it's, you know, we still have a lot. We still have a lot we want to do in terms of, you know, cultures and communities that we can include in the game.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that the throughput that I'm sort of hearing after listening to you speak for about 15 minutes is like, it really is about providing really excellent gameplay experiences first and being inclusive, creating excellent gameplay experience that everyone can. It's not like beating you over the head with it. It's like, hey, like, let's just make a really freaking awesome game. And then, you know, it's an implicit side effect of that is like, or at least I think maybe I'm projecting here, but an unstated goal is like, let's just open up people's minds using games as a transformative tool, which it is. It's like one of the most powerful transformative tools because you are playing a game. It's your experience. So we're running a little bit low on time, and I do have another topic I kind of want to dig into, but I think it sort of bridges back to, it may or may not bridge back to this depending on how clever we are. But one of the things that is really taking over games by storm is like Web3 and NFT. And I know you guys are talking about ways of using Web3 technology in your games. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you guys are doing there?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's still early days in a way, but this has been planned for a long time. And if you had asked me, 3-6 months ago about NFTs, I would have said that I think we're at that point in the hype cycle where people are overestimating the short term of NFTs and underestimating the long term. Clearly, we've passed at least one of those bumps now. I don't know how many more there will be to come, but it's that kind of NFT technology is a way for us who have a game that's all about collecting beautiful card art from independent artists, is a way for us to give genuine ownership of that to players. So we're really building the game with an ultimate goal of having building a thriving card art economy that benefits players and artists and us. And it's very additive. I think there are games that there are obviously games that are built around NFTs and blockchain tech. But for us, ad revenue is already great. Subscriptions are good. The changes to the collection metagame are gonna drive in-app purchase revenue by a significant amount. And then the NFT element on top just adds another layer that will allow us to scale the game further and faster than we would be able to without it.
I think this is a great example of what you're talking about, Ian. One thing we harp on a lot here is there's a lot of copycat models for, when Axie exploded, a lot of people just tried to do their version of Axie and similar kind of gaming economies. But one thing we harp on a lot is like, Web3 is really just a tool set, and approach it from the first principles of like, how does this tool set enhance my game? Maybe not at all. You don't have to touch it, but you found a very natural way where you take a piece of this technology and make it additive to the experience for your player base, not something where you force them to dive deep down a crypto rabbit hole and earn a token and sell that token. I think it's a very natural, tasteful implementation of Web3 technology. Yeah, and most of the NFTs we're gonna give away for free. So we'll use it as an engagement tool as much as for it's not a short-term thing for us. It's about building that kind of long-term kind of player economy. We haven't chosen a tech partner yet. That's still something we're trying to figure out. We have an incredible amount of amazing content, and there's different factors in that choice. We're just hiring a CTO at the moment, so that's going to be one of their jobs to help us figure out who's the best partner for that. I should probably pick your brains about that at some point. But yeah, it's I think I wouldn't, although NFTs are completely are a huge part of our future, I wouldn't describe Flick as an NFT game any more than I would describe it as an AWS game or a Unity game. It's one of the technologies that we will use that allows us to do something really interesting, and means we don't have to build trading and marketplaces ourselves. We can leverage technology that already exists, that people that companies are putting a lot of money into investing in.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, I think it's the most level-headed and reasonable way to think about Web3 technology in games. And that's the correct way to think about it, basically as another lever to make your game better. One of the interesting advents of Web3 technology is this popularization of pseudonymity or anonymity in the Web3 community. I'm curious if you think about I'm curious if you have any thoughts about how that bridges to the sort of broader topic of inclusivity and or diversity within the games industry. And
Maybe
either
if I,
Ian or Warren, yeah.
yeah, maybe if I can chime in here with an anecdote. I went to NFT NYC earlier this year, and it was my first sort of in-person event related to what the Web3 communities that I'm part of. And I went to a party at someone's house for one of the communities that I'm more active in. And what was crazy was just the diversity of people there. There was everything from like 15-year-old 15-year-old guys to like there was like a 78-year-old woman who was an entrepreneur. It was just a wild crew of people who would never hang out with each other by sort of like their kind of like self-identifying of being of the same group. But the fact that we all met in this semi-anonymous space, and this particular community is a lot of people that are building in the Web3 gaming segment. We had all bonded, had meaningful conversations, worked with each other. I met people in person for the first time for a gaming project that I'm working on the side, and all of these relationships had developed sort of devoid of what gender are you, what age are you, what ethnicity are you, and I think that that's a really powerful thing that's coming from the advent of digital identities in Web3. And yeah, Ian, I'm curious if you have had similar experiences, or if you see any through line between the ability to create, kind of recreating and normalizing the playing field via digital identities with some of your work in inclusivity in gaming. It's a broad topic there.
Yeah, it's not. It's not something I've looked too much into or thought too much about. I mean, when anonymity is concerned, I think that there's two big things pop into my head immediately. One is that if you are not out yet, being able to be anonymous and engage with the community and while you're figuring things out is incredibly valuable. But on the other side of the coin, it also means idiots can be anonymous and be hateful with no
No recourse.
So that's no recourse. Thank you. So that's pretty bad. I mean, but what you described, Warren, is the same as when I used to play World of Warcraft many years ago for the first 7 years of its life, and I made friends through that game who I'd never met in person, who I'd never met in person, and ended up going to Stockholm and staying with a couple who I'd introduced in game, and she was pregnant with his baby. And then I went to stay at another guy's house who was he was like one of the top economics journalists in Sweden,
Yeah.
And running a hedge fund at the time. So it's just, it's great to be able to make these, connections, not based on, anything that you know about the person, just their personality and your interactions with them, right?
Right. Yeah, and the idea of a digital reputation that can increase and is driven by your actions rather than who you are. I think that that's quite powerful.
So there could be recourse to the earlier point, right?
Yeah, well, it's the difference of, if someone has a reputation for doing great work and providing great value to the communities versus just sort of like an anon troll that pops up and starts, saying hateful things. Like obviously the stature and reputation of those two individuals is quite different within the Web3 community.
Well, there's some interesting downstream effects of your ability to just like toss an identity and spin up new ones. So there's like clearly positive and negatives on both sides. Really interesting topic. I honestly think this digital identity could be its whole own episode. Maybe we'll come back to that topic later down the line. Ian, thank you for talking us through this complicated and interesting and nuanced topic. Really appreciate your input here. Clearly you've thought about this quite a bit. We want to move to our last section, which is app of the week. We'll go to Warren first. Warren, do you have an app this week?
I do. This week, I actually found myself with enough free time laying in bed, not sleeping, to go hunting around and find a new fun game to play. This has gotten pretty popular, but I just had my first experience with it. It's Dicey Dungeons. It's a premium app, and I think it's a great one to highlight because while it's a very different game from something like Solitaire, I see some through lines in sort of the spirit of this game. Of it's a easy to pick up game that has like, you know, great art, very clean UI, and you can kind of play at your own pace. So I mean, what is Dicey Dungeons? It's basically like a very cute, like dice-based strategic RPG, for lack of better description. And I think it'll scratch a lot of itches for people that like CCGs, but it's something way less complex that you don't need to, you know, go into the. It's not like Magic the Gathering where you're going through a tutorial for, you know, several years essentially before you master it. You can pick up and play. It has, for me, like kind of like the, I don't want to think too hard, but I want to think a little bit as I wind down. But yeah, it's super engaging gameplay. It was something that I played for way longer sessions than I anticipated. And it's nice to just take a spin with a premium app once in a while that's not, you know, hitting you with paywalls to move through to the next section. So yeah, have either of you guys messed around with Dicey Dungeons?
I bought it at some point. I downloaded it, but I've never played much of it. One thing I noticed, it was on like one of some game websites list for #1 mobile game of the year so far. So I mean,
I think
at least
that's
a few
actually
people
how it got on my radar. Yeah.
at least some people. Ian, have you seen this game?
I have not. It's been on my list as well, but it's one I didn't get to. But it's made by Terry Kavanagh, who's a prolific game designer and has done some really good work. So it's really nice to see him. You know, the success he's had from that game is great.
Cool.
Awesome.
Ian, do you have an app this week?
I thought I did. So I I have a big soft spot for JRPGs. And I'm currently playing Live Alive on Switch, which I'm really enjoying, but which is in this like what do they call it? HD 2D kind of art style. Because I really enjoyed Octopath Traveler on the Switch also, but the Octopath Traveler, an Octopath Traveler game just came out on mobile like in this week, and I tried to play it and it failed to load. And then it failed to allow me to connect to the login system. So I haven't played it yet, but I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, I watched the intro cinematic. I had a similar issue where I had to create an account. And it was a disaster to sign up for. It took me like 15 minutes. And then I watched like a 15-minute intro movie, which is JRPG, like tradition. And then I was like, okay, I'll come back to this. Half an hour into this gameplay experience, I put the phone down without playing for a second. So yeah, the Octopath Traveler mobile game. So I had a similar experience. See what it sounds like.
All right, let's compare notes in a week or so.
Yeah, Live Alive looks great though. This looks right up my alley. I want to check this out. Xander, do you have an app this week? Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Ian.
Live Alive is a good game if you don't have too much time in your life, because it's like 7 chapters with different characters that you can play in any order you want, and each of the chapters is about like 2 or 3 hours long. So you could just like sit down an evening, play a chapter, half a chapter, feel like you've accomplished something, and move on. It's good.
I'm glad you said that, because that's usually the thing that keeps me away from playing so many RPGs that look amazing to me, is just my limited gaming hours these days. So that's
it's a really interesting model. Yeah.
Xander, what you got this week?
Yes, my app this week is a little bit strange. There's a few things that are true. Like one, I'm very, very bad at guitar, like terrible at guitar. And 2, I just spent a couple $100 buying an electric guitar, and I needed some way to get from like 0 to 1 on playing a guitar. And so I was looking at a couple different things, and one of the apps I downloaded was an app called Fender Play. And Fender Play is an app which is basically just, it teaches you the basics of how to play guitar with an interactive video series and sort of tutorial system that both shows you things to practice, then has like a scoring feedback mechanism, so you can sort of play and it'll tell you how good you're actually doing. So I'm like 5 to 6 weeks into this journey, and may have spent 2 or 3 weeks with the guitar sitting there untouched, and I just picked it back up this week being like, all right, you spent money on this, you got to play it. But Fender Play, there's some annoying stuff, like I just can't do some of the chords, and someone needs to tell me what I'm doing wrong. Maybe I'll come to New Jersey and Warren can yell at me at some time about how my grip is wrong. But it is a really, really interesting app. It gets you started really quickly. You can learn to play stuff that sounds not like nothing within like a week or 2, which is pretty cool. So Fender Play is an interesting one. Definitely recommend checking it out if you're in the same boat as me in terms of your inability to play guitar.
Xander, you have a little more of a background with like electronic music, right? Relative to playing guitar and
still not very much, but relative to playing guitar.
This looks really cool. Another, I think, good onboarding experience that I've seen for people getting, you know, newer into like composing and working with new instruments is Ableton. They have a really good kind of like onboarding process that teaches you some kind of core music basics that I think apply to, you know, anyone that's learning anything new in music. But this looks cool too. It looks like it's pretty well designed, good reviews. I'm historically, even though I've played guitar my whole life, I'm historically a very bad guitar player as well. So I might pick this up myself.
For sure. Awesome. Well, thank you guys all for listening. Ian, really appreciate you coming on to have sort of a nuanced discussion about a complicated and very large topic. So really appreciate that. If someone wants to get a hold of you or learn more about Flick Games or any of the projects you're involved with, how can they do that?
Email is easiest. Ian, IAN @flick.games.
Great. Warren, take us out.
Yeah, Ian, it was such a pleasure to have you on. I think this was a cool topic, and hopefully gets people to think about inclusivity in gaming in a less begrudging way as something they need to do, but it more as an opportunity to you know, have you know, a better team with more to offer, more perspectives, and creating new kinds of content that can be more fun, more diverse, and more engaging. So we really are rooting for your team and for the success of Flick Solitaire and whatever you do next.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. So thank you to all the listeners that joined today. As always, the episode is brought to you by the team at Upptic. Here at Upptic, you know, we do all things to help games grow. This is a combination of the technology that we build to automate and streamline all parts of the growth marketing process, from creative to ASO to user acquisition, to our awesome human beings on our team that actually, you know, help you to execute on all of this core work. We're always looking for amazing developers to work with. We're pretty picky. We try to just work with the best of the best and teams we really believe in to help them scale. And if you'd ever like to talk to us and explore those kind of partnerships, feel free to reach out to us through our website. That's the easiest way. And that is at upptic.com. That's upptic.com.
Talk soon.